Good morning, IPC, or good afternoon, IPC, if you have me in the afternoon. I hope you've had a wonderful day so far. We are going to be starting a new worksheet, but I want to explain a few things before we do get started. So why am I doing so many worksheets? Well, a couple of reasons, okay? The first reason is these worksheets have a lot of good notes on them. So instead of us sitting down and taking notes, which I know isn't everybody's favorite activity, this has all of those notes already written for you, so we don't have to spend that extra time. The second reason is because you guys do get to turn it in and I do get to grade it so I can get those grades for you and to boost your average for this class. Okay? It makes things a little bit easier on me rather than having to go back and check all of your notebooks to see if you're doing your work. And it also helps me kind of make sure that y'all are on the right track with progress, okay? And then last but not least, like I said, it's just easier all around. And it kind of keeps us more on track of what we need to cover for the 6 weeks, okay? Last but not least, these are kind of background things that we need to know before really starting our unit. We have actually started the unit. I gave you the vocab words and everything. We're just still kind of covering the basics so we can really get into it. But we need to know all this background information in order to actually succeed when it comes to our unit. So all of those reasons are why we've been doing worksheets rather than working in your notebook as much, and I hope y'all understand my reasons why. So today you should have a new worksheet in front of you. The front should say control and experimental variables. We kind of went over these a little bit in the chemistry half of our class, not a ton, and I know I definitely didn't call them these terms, but we do need to re-go over them for this half of the semester. So what are variables in experiments? Variables in experiments are, well, let's just read this part. Experiments demand control. If more than one variable changes at a time, the cause and effect is unclear. Okay? Your control variables. Control variables are the variables that you control. You don't change them in an experiment. So the control variables are all other variables rather than the experimental variable. So for example, if you want to know how speed affects gas mileage, then speed is the only variable that should change. The car, the tires, the road, the wind speed, they all need to be the same. They need to be controlled. They are the control variables. Okay? The experimental variable is the variable that you are actually studying, so you're changing this one. Okay? The experimental variable is the only variable that you actually change. So their example is, if you are studying how salt affects boiling temperature, then salt is the experimental variable. By only changing the salt, you will be able to learn how it works. Okay? So what are we going to do? We're going to determine what experimental variable is in these experiments. So how does salt change the freezing temperature of water? Okay. Well, based off of what we've learned up here, if we're studying how salt affects boiling temperature, it should be the same thing with freezing temperature. So salt is going to be our experimental variable in this first one. And then question number 2 for this little part is, does ultraviolet or UV radiation affect skin cancer? Okay, so what do you think is going to be the experimental variable? Is it going to be the ultraviolet radiation or is it going to be the skin cancer? Well, it's going to be the UV radiation, okay? So the different amounts of UV radiation is how we would change that. And then over here, experiment. How does vitamin B12 affect health? I don't know why they keep putting effects. That's wrong. Anyways, so here, what would be the experimental variable? Give you just a second to write down your guess. Your experimental variable will be the vitamin B12, okay? And then why would this be a difficult experiment? Okay, I want to see your answer here. I'm not going to give you the answer because I want to see what you think about this one. So why would this experiment on how does vitamin B12 affect health be difficult? Okay, so let's move down. Let's move down to right here. I'm going to actually close this a little bit so we have a bit more space. Okay, so here is our question for this first little experiment, okay? Does weight affect the speed of an object going downhill? Right here, I want you to write your hypothesis. Remember, a hypothesis is an educated guess based off of what you've seen previously, okay? Usually when we write hypotheses, we would say, I hypothesize that, and then you fill in the rest of that sentence, okay? So I hypothesize that speed will be blank by going downhill, or weight will affect the speed this way. However you want to write it. Okay, so for the experiment, what is going to be our experimental variable? Okay, what is going to be our experimental variable? Well, for this one, the experimental variable is going to be the weight. Okay, we are going to change the weight of it to see how that affects the speed. So what are our control variables? Control variables could be the car that we use, or whatever we're using, the object that's going downhill. The slope is going to be a control variable. The temperature, the weight, sorry, not the weight, the track, all those things are all control variables. We want to keep them the same, okay? And then it tells us our little procedure. So the procedure is to make sure that the ring stand is in the 12th hole from the bottom. You're going to put the photo gates at 10 centimeters and 20 centimeters. And then do 3 trials with no weights, 1 weight, and 2 weights. Then calculate the average speed for each. You'll notice that it's asking you to do this, right? Well, you guys may or may not be actually working with this here in a little bit, depending on behavior. If not, I'm going to make a little video of it and you're going to follow along with it. I'm pretty sure y'all want to do this little experiment, so you better be behaving. Okay? But in order to also do this experiment, you do need to have this half of the experiment filled in. Okay? And then it has more on the back. So again, this is more practice for you. You are going to match the variables on the left with the quantities on the right. You will use the worksheets or formulas, your formula chart probably, for this one, because you probably don't have the worksheets back yet. I'm still working on grading them. You're going to use your variable chart that you stapled into your notebook to figure this one out. And then for these questions, you are going to read the little 2 sentences at the top. You're going to list the variables, the both the experimental and the control in this little area. Then you're going to tell me which equation we're going to use. So if it's speed, tell me the equation for speed. Okay? And then you're going to use the numbers in here, plug it into that equation, and solve for it. Okay? I want you to spend the rest of this period working on this back half of the worksheet, and then also to make sure that you have done this half of the worksheet as well, okay? In order to be able to do this experiment, we have to have all of those done. Okay. So take your time. For the first part of the class, you do need to be working on your own. Try to figure these out on your own. If Miss Gonzalez needs to move you around, she will do so, but you need to make sure you're not talking. You need to make sure that you're actually doing your work. Okay? If you do need help for this, remember I do after school tutorials on both Tuesdays and Wednesdays. So you're welcome to say it should be in this room if I'm not in this room right away, or if you're kind of just standing there, come check Miss Trevino's room. I'm probably in one of the two, or trying to finish up some work. Okay? Or just come up to me in the hallways during passing periods. I love to see y'all. Have a wonderful day, and I will talk to y'all later. Bye.